Hello, my name is François Arès. I'm one of the owners of Galerie Robertson Arès in downtown Montreal. Today I have Derrick Velasquez with me, and we're going to be talking about his solo exhibition, Wavelike, at the gallery. Welcome, Derrick.
How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Things have been opening up here in Montreal. The sun is out. People are feeling more confident to wander around. And we have a full gallery of your work here. We have some of your vinyl installations. We have some of your collage work and some new body of sculpture work. How long did it take you to put together this show?
I would say that I made most of the vinyl works, the Untitled series. I think I gave myself a deadline of about January 15th to make as many of those. And this is going through the winter because I knew that I wanted to explore some and show some other avenues of work that I've been experimenting with in the studio. And that comes down to the collages and some of the architectural trim molding resin sculptures that are also in the exhibition. So I don't know, it took a few months to kind of make the vinyl pieces that are in there, the Untitled series, and then probably another 2 months to get the experimentation of the resin works to the point that I wanted them. So I don't know, 6 months maybe of kind of work, and some of it, the vinyl pieces I kind of just make. I kind of know how to make them. It's a relatively mechanical process, not the way that they're built. Like some of these are like very unique and color palettes I've never really ever shown or kind of gone into. So even into, I think I'm on Untitled 330, I'm still making these very new color palettes to myself. So they still take time to build, but the real experimentation came with some of the other works.
When you're laying out these vinyl pieces that you're working on, and you have like an incredible color palette that you're working with, do you have in your studio 50, 60, 70 different colors that you're working with, or do you work with a very limited color palette at a time? How do you approach building an exhibition's worth of vinyl installations?
I'd say it goes a couple different ways. There are some where I know what I want to make. The yellow one that's kind of on the wall that is back to the window, that's only 2 colors, and it's very planned, kind of with the width. I want like thicker, darker yellows, and then a thinner line that separates those ones. So that one is pretty planned, but I think that also still comes from having quite a few colors within the studio. I probably have like 50 to 60 colors. And then also I've been going to the same warehouse that provides the vinyl for long enough where they just let me walk through the rows of just these shelves of rolls of different colors of vinyl. And that allows me to see small variations in some colors. Sometimes you only have one color, like maybe there's really only 5 or 6 blues, but then you get into the blue green a little bit, and it allows me to really compare almost on the spot to see something that I don't have. So it's a little bit of both, ones that are very planned, and then ones that kind of come just by looking at the next color and then putting it on, cutting it, and then stopping and then looking for the next color. So they go a couple different ways when I'm making them.
From my understanding, this is vinyl that people are going to be using on boats, which are going to cover the seat and the ship, right?
Yeah, it's Naga hide. It's the seat of a boat, perhaps in a diner. It's basically just a leather alternative that is plastic vinyl. So it comes in a bunch of wild colors because some people want their boats or like diners in hot yellow, so it's kind of amazing the range of colors in it. And they also the colors do go in trend. I don't think I'm necessarily making works on trends of colors, but some colors do completely disappear because they may go out of style either within interior design or what people desire to put on whatever their application is. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes I'll get a role and then I ask the supplier to let me know if something's gonna get discontinued, because I'm like, okay, then I order about 3 rolls of it just to have it, which just seems kind of futile a little bit, because once it's gone forever. But it's kind of nice sometimes because I'll look back at some of my very early works and I can notice that that color is gone and it will never come back. And it makes, I mean, every piece is wholly unique, but for me, it's almost a little bit of like a history of the layering, of the kind of colors and my own kind of personal history in making these.
So when you walk into the supplier's warehouse, who probably don't normally meet artists who are going to transform their material into installations, at first they were probably curious as to what you're doing, but now how do they react when you come in and you're ordering 3, 4, 5, 6 rolls at a time?
They love me. I'm pretty sure that for someone who's not their typical, a lot of times people will just come in for a yard and a half to reupholster a seat. And then I come in and ask for a whole roll. And I think that relationship's like, initially they're like, are you interior designer? Are you upholsterer? And then I showed them what it was and like, that's cool. We've never seen that. And I think that that relationship being built has been kind of funny, but they like me. And I, to have that kind of relationship with kind of a large warehouse distributor is really fruitful and like kind of really amazing, because when they get in a new line, they'll be like, hey, look at this new line. And, so I can kind of know when new things are coming in as well.
And they're going to be able to add to your vocabulary. Speaking of which, for this show, I think it was an exploration of your talents, and we received a number of different collage work that I know you've been working on for a while, but it seems to really coming together. Can you discuss a little bit the process behind the collage works and what you're thinking about? What is your intention behind them?
Yeah, so those collage works, it's been a pretty long progression of thinking about architecture, thinking about modernism, thinking about classical styles of architecture. From a few works, I did a large scale installation where I was kind of critiquing new builds in Denver. Denver has a lot of surface level parking lots. It's not completely dense. There was an urban renewal where they removed much of the old warehouse stock in Denver, and that promise of urban renewal has never been met. They did this in the 70s, and there's a bunch of surface level parking lots, and now they're building these large, boxy, fake luxury, modernist architecture that's probably popping up in all cities across the US. I'm not sure about Montreal or what the speed of development can happen there. So I was always looking at this modernist perspective versus in America, maybe even North America, coming over from Europe, and how we have Victorian buildings, we have brick buildings that a lot of Europeans make fun of because they're like, brick is a crap material. And we're like, that's what we have. But the brickwork that's done here is actually like very beautiful in some of our older cities. And so I'm looking at that like modernism and the lack and the move away of ornamentation, but appreciating cities that still have ornamentation, because Denver really lacks it. It's a post-industrial city. There aren't a lot of buildings with any kind of ornamentation. And now this very new gentrifying development is trying to take modernism and turn it into crap modernism. So I'm really trying to jam these ornamentation and these very more like angular type of formal qualities of work. The process is I cut all of the trim molding out of books about like Versailles, Buckingham Palace, the Hermitage, even in Moscow and Russia, and reorganize those ornamental cutouts around almost like color fields and kind of gradients or waves of color. And so those collages are, I think, kind of a next step for me of thinking not just about the architecture and the way that I live in the city, but then thinking about architecture and ornamentation as a more formal and kind of like artistic motif.
I find that as I saw the images coming in of the collages, there's a fascination with color, the layout. And then as I was hanging them and as I've been able to go through the show day in and day out, here, I'm just going to move through just to kind of get through. Sorry, here we go. The detail is that your eye really wanders, and there's an incredible balance in terms of structure, the way that you've been able to put these together. I find that the use of classical imagery, but I find that your strength is that mix of color with subject matter, back and forth. What is your background in terms of training to be a professional artist?
I went to undergrad in Santa Barbara, California. I kind of attempted to avoid art because my brother's 3 years older than me. So when I was a freshman, even in high school, my brother was a senior, and he would draw for like the poetry magazine in high school, and people would be like, "Oh, are you going to take over drawing?" It's like, I draw stick figures. I can't do this. And then we ended up going to the same undergraduate school as well. So again, I was a freshman, he was a senior, and the art professors be like, "Hey, are you going to take my class?" It's like, no, I don't really do art. I do some photography, but that's it. I ended up doing a lot of art history. So I have a degree in art history and art studio, but I found art studio a little bit later in my university training. And then I went to get my MFA in sculpture at Ohio State University. It was a great program. It was very self-directed. It wasn't too critically harsh. Wasn't attempting to like break me down in any way. Yes, that's kind of the formal training. And then I moved to Denver almost 14 years ago now. And I don't know, I think living in the city of Denver and seeing it go through a lot of growth has really helped my energy and helped me kind of have like a relatively easy learning curve of how I make things. My work takes a lot of time to develop kind of new ideas. The collages that you were talking about started at a residency in early 2019, MacDowell Fellowship, and that these collages, I think one of them was developed there and is now being shown. So it's almost three years of developing some of these collages, some of these motifs, and some of these other avenues and ways of thinking that I think still relate to color and relate to structure of the vinyl pieces, but are kind of going in these other curiosities that I might have.
I find one of the fascinating aspects of your work is the use of gravity, your overlapping of the vinyls on the sides. It's going to create kind of a stutter for your eye. And then on top of it, the fact that you're dealing with about an inch worth of material that's going to cast a secondary shadow on the wall. So there is a lot of complexity in terms of what you're putting together with these installation pieces. Would you call them an installation or a sculpture? That's something we've discussed at the gallery.
They're probably wall sculptures. Yeah, for sure. They're definitely sculptural. I mean, they have a thickness to them. The way that people typically approach them, I mean, I think all art relates to the body, and the way that these relate to the body is not just the approach and the way that people interact with them, whether they touch them or not. I've had people, I've gone to art fairs where my work has been up, and people look around and then smell it, like put their face literally in it, or like, yeah, like look around and then like, touch its edges. And, that my galleries be like, my God, don't touch this. Like, for me, that's fascinating. Don't do it. Don't touch art all the time. But, you know, it's fascinating for me because I think that that's the inner, there's something that draws somebody in where, you know, the material itself relates to the body because it's meant to be sat on. It's meant to be a skin or a cover over some apparatus that conforms to the body already. And then also the way that it forms with kind of a central armature and these things draping over it. I let the gravity do the work and I let the accumulation do the work. A lot of times people ask me if they're cut at different lengths because it almost looks like it gets shorter, but it's all the same length. But as that kind of like arc gets longer, it looks like it shortens up a little bit in relationship to just the way that it's structured. But that's the way, you know, our bodies function of material kind of like accumulating over bone and then rounding out eventually.
No, it's an excellent way of looking at it. One of the aspects of your show that I know that Emily, Rachel, and I that were very excited to see as it came in was this new body of sculpture making reference to the classical Rococo Baroque style of decoration that we're going to find in classical homes. And here you've put this twist on it. They're made out of resin, and you're working with these moldings, from what I understand. Can you tell us a little bit about this sculptural series that you're working on? And does it have a title for this series?
I guess the one that's kind of tied as a knot, I call it trim knot. And that's pretty straightforward. That series also started at that same residency. I basically did this series of residencies on the East Coast to not make the vinyl works and to kind of explore mostly the architectural trim molding, some painting that I was working on, and that all dealt with decoration. And so those works came, I knew I wanted to work with trim molding and I wanted to cast it in silicone was the initial idea. And so I had these silicone, I really wanted to take the rigidity of architectural trim molding that always lines a building, even if ornamental molding goes around, let's say a curve, you know, like a circular dome, it flexes, but it's still a very rigid type of thing. And I wanted to make it flexible and almost like flaccid and kind of funny, honestly. And so casting it in silicone, it's like, okay, this will be interesting. I can do it in some other colors. And I just kind of laid them on a chair. I didn't know what to do with them. So this was 3 years ago. And then maybe a year and a half ago, I took the very flexible silicone, which is almost as flexible as the material of my vinyl. And it was sitting in the corner and I just tied it in this knot one time. I was like, that's what I'm after. I'm trying to kind of like poke a little fun at it, but, you know, also just make notice of how rigid it is and what its purpose is. And so it's a very, very analog, long-term process to get where I'm now casting it in resin. Resin is this chemical process where it's a 2-part mold. It heats up and then it cures into the rigid form. But I remember doing a casting class in grad school, and when it's hot and in about 4 minutes, it has a little bit of flexibility, and I wanted to test that flexibility of the resin and then almost freeze it in this other state. So it's very analog. I mix the resin, I have a silicone rubber mold, I pour it in, I wait about 4 minutes, and while it's hot, like you can get a chemical like heat burn from this thing still, I take it out of the mold and I tie it in the knot. So it's very analog. It's not like scanned and then carved out. It's done in, you know, resin isn't a totally traditional material, something like bronze would be, but you couldn't tie it in a knot like this. But yeah, so I really like that analog process. It does really make me think about the vinyl pieces and the analog process. Like I am hand cutting these rolls to get this thing to flex and to accumulate. And the architectural trim knot is very similar in the process of how long it takes me to kind of develop some of these ideas.
I find that this is the image that's on the screen right now is a perfect example of how these two bodies of work like marry beautifully. There's that flow of, there's motion to it, and it begs your eye to scan and look at every detail of both bodies of work. Your exhibition is called Wavelike. I feel like this is a good description of what we're seeing in front of us. Right now you are represented in the United States and in Canada. Do you have intention of exploring galleries in Europe or in Asia as the year goes forward?
I think I'll have some pieces, some commission pieces that will go off to, I think, Dubai, but allegedly my gallery, am I supposed to say this? I think, we'll see. Allegedly my gallery in New York might be opening, because one of them is Korean. They might be trying to open a satellite space in Korea. I don't know if my work always fits there. You know, I mean, I think the vinyl pieces can go anywhere. They're relatively abstract and material based. You know, but I don't know. I mean, I would, yeah, I'd like to develop the kind of trim molding a little more and see how that goes. Because I've never been to Montreal, so I actually don't know what the architectural styles of Montreal are. It's like a very old city. It's French Canadian, so I imagine there's a lot of that over there. But in a place like Denver, they hit very differently. Like the trim, anything I do in trim molding hits very differently because we just don't have it here. But in cities where it's more prominent, I'm kind of curious about, yeah, the specific city's relationship to this motif and this material and the way I'm kind of treating it. So yeah, I'm very curious to see in other parts of the world how people relate to it, because that architectural style is all over the world, and the ornamentation is all over the world. And so yeah, I would definitely be interested in seeing what the reaction is to either the vinyl pieces individually or some of these trim molding kind of pieces individually as well.
Well, Montreal is quite an old city in North America, and it has that little flavor of Europe. Same with Quebec City, which is not far from Montreal. I know personally, I'm very excited to see what you're going to be doing with these moldings, these knots, the trim, etc. I want to see where you're going to explore. And I think as an artist, it's important to feel that level of excitement in being creative and not get into just the rut of recreating something that doesn't inspire you. And I find that one of the aspects that I find about your career is that you are renewing yourself. Every time I see new work come from you, there's always an aspect that shows that you're constantly pushing forward. And well, I know that Montreal is going to be ready for when you have your series of sculpture that come out. We want to see what you're able to put together. And I know you yourself also run your own gallery space in Denver. So you also have that part of working with artists, having deadlines, promoting the show, having vernissage. So you have different hats. And at the same time, you're going to be curating a show at the gallery here in Montreal in September. So what's it like balancing life between the artist and then also being a gallerist?
It's strange. Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of people who do it, but at the same, like, you do it. And but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been able to use a lot of my experience as an artist to run the kind of gallery that I desire to run. And it's more of a project space. And I mean, I've been running, I would say I run spaces out of necessity, and usually organize exhibitions out of necessity. It's not, you know, any form of necessarily, I don't want to lose money, but it's not like a livelihood. I want to break even or use spaces. Like I ran a gallery out of my basement for about 4 years because the overhead was $0. So it was very nice. And I was able to kind of take an old space and make it new again in a house that I live in, where I just never went to the basement. I was like, okay, I'll go to the basement and I'll do some remodeling and make it nicer so that I feel comfortable going down there, because it was kind of dingy. And so that was a space out of necessity, because a lot of spaces in Denver were being raided. A lot of DIY spaces and gallery spaces and artist spaces were just being raided by the fire departments after the Ghost Ship fire, which was a fire that happened in Oakland, California, where 40 people died. They were all living in a kind of a warehouse space. People don't want to live or function in there, but as a function of economics, they have to. And so I started my gallery because I imagined that they couldn't shut my space down, or they couldn't inspect my space and have exhibitions. And a lot of exhibition spaces were, again, being overly inspected. They were being targeted in a way that was actually like pretty predatory and kind of awful. And those spaces, it's never recovered in Denver. And so the new space I'm running, called Friend of a Friend, is an exhibition space in an old school building. It was built in 1904. I rented the space in March of 2021, so it was still pre-vaccination. And the space was big enough. It's mostly empty. It's a 3-story brick building that some developers bought, but they want to develop it. But because of the pandemic and probably building material cost and labor shortages, they weren't able to renovate it immediately. And so now we have kind of free access to space. There's not that many tenants. There's probably 40 different rooms, maybe 10 of them are occupied right now. So there was a ton of space. The hallways are very, very wide, very large, and there was access to a rooftop deck. And I really wanted to have a safe space for the arts community to come back when they had been shuttered and artist exhibitions had been canceled for a year, and artists were probably in their homes, either alone or very isolated, making work. And I wanted to show that work. And I wanted to give us like a safe space pre-vaccination for people to be indoors with masks, and then outdoors, because we have access to outdoor space, and kind of mingle. And so again, it was a space that came out of necessity. And I really wanted to bring back the Denver community, which is an amazingly friendly community. There are a lot of people who let's say over the first year of the pandemic, I only met 5 new people. And I'm used to, meeting people at openings or traveling and going to openings in cities that I'm not as familiar with, and meeting people and doing studio visits with people in New York and LA, and just reaching out on Instagram, being like, hey, I run a gallery. Can I and I'm an artist. Can I see your studio? And what I realized is there were a lot of people, again, who moved to Denver during the pandemic who didn't get to meet anybody at all. They were completely isolated from an arts community. And I kind of reached out to some of those people. And I don't know, I say like I just have been kind of throwing parties and with exhibitions attached to them, but the exhibitions have been very meaningful for people as well. But that the intention has a duality to it, because I don't know. I think Denver just really needed that energy. And we've now been in the space for 12 months, and we've done 11 exhibitions in 12 months. And we've just been cranking them out for that reason, because our time in the space is also limited. They're going to renovate the building come June, maybe July. So I knew that the time in the space would be limited.
I find that putting on exhibitions and what you're talking about, being around the crowd, having people come in who appreciate art or who are artists themselves, that entire dialogue I find to be very inspiring, in the sense that I find like right now we're in the golden age of art. Here you are working with vinyl, you're working with resin, you've got Photoshop available to you, you've got neons if you want, you've got plexiglass. the artists of the 50s and 60s would be over the moon as to what we can play with right now as artists and gallerists. And then here we have these interactions happening, little shows, big exhibitions, people talking. I find all of this put together, at least for my own practice, I find when I go back to the studio, I have just ideas churning all the time. And I find that that balance between gallerist and artist is it keeps pushing the ideas forward. You're not locked into your space just working on your own work. You have to come out, you have to discuss it, you have to be able to have a dialogue with somebody, and people are going to challenge what you're about. Not everybody's going to agree with what you're about or what you're talking about, and you have to have the appropriate responses in all of those circumstances. And I find that you have an excellent eye for people's work. So when we watch what you're putting together, I know when I was discussing with Emily, we both said we have to have Derrick curate something at the gallery. Like he has this eye for people's work that these artists obviously also need a voice themselves. So we're very much looking forward to the show that you're going to put together in September. I hope you're looking forward to it. And then hopefully Canadian COVIDian rules are going to be more flexible come September, and you'll come for a visit and come to see the beautiful city of Montreal in September. It's still pretty nice then.
Yeah. It's when I do more curatorial, like running the gallery, it's great. You know, you can do a solo exhibition and then you just rely on the person to mostly bring the work and have the show. And we've done, I'd say, friend of a friend, I think we've done 4 or 5 solo exhibitions, and the rest were group exhibitions, which, you know, curatorially, we're trying to put some kind of curatorial thing together, but it's also very loosely themed. We're just trying to show as many artists as possible with the best art that we can find, both regionally, nationally, and we've, you know, shown one artist from London and one artist from Peru. So we're trying to show new artists and new work that we're looking at. I'm fortunate enough where I get to travel for my work, and I go pretty much for like food, art, and friends. So I see a lot of art. I'm really lucky to meet quite a few people. And yeah, curatorially, ideas come to me very slowly when it's exhibitions in kind of other places that aren't the gallery. We can somehow throw together exhibitions like really quickly at the project space I'm running now. But yeah, I'm excited to yeah, organize an exhibition outside of Denver and to do it at the gallery. And I already have an idea. I already have a title. I have an idea, and I have most of the artists I think already selected. So yeah, it's sometimes, but I think it's an exhibition that I've had to, because you proposed it a very long time ago. So maybe it just takes a full year to come up with something that I think kind of ties things together conceptually, but it's going to be very broad work, we'll say.
I know exactly what you mean. Whenever we put anything together, you've got Emily, Rachel, myself, we're all going to move pieces left, right, and center, and then we're going to change our minds, and we're going to come back to the first iteration of what we came up, and then we're going to switch it up again. And it's funny is that process, that dialogue between the three of us, we managed to really get the sharpest outtake of everything. Is that just putting together one person is not the same as putting together as something as a team. That's for at the gallery space and with art fairs and whatnot. I'm just going to wrap this up, Derrick. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time. And the show is on until April 8th. And this YouTube video will be up for posterity as well as a nice nod to Wavelike. And well, Derrick, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.